Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Evil. Great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Another wild episode, just another wild season finale. Okay. So first and foremost, we are picking up where the previous episode left off with the Monsignor getting killed and the sad thing of Father Ignatius being there. You know, obviously word had to get to him. I don't think Grace had an opportunity to tell him or like, oh, well, she didn't hear the final message. Plus she got, whispered away, before anything could go down because they needed to get her out of there before even the cops showed up because they needed to be able to get Grace out of there. Because for one, she's not officially legally supposed to be in this country, so there's that element to it. So because if she gets caught up in this, there's a good chance she might get sent back, and that it's like, no, the church is trying to keep her safe because she's the one that they need. But the sad thing is for her, she beats herself up because she's like, I saw what was going to happen to me, but I didn't see the Monsignor sacrificing himself to save me. She had submitted herself to her destiny, and it's like, right, she's like, she's like, I've never been so blind in my life. So either because it has something to do with her, so even her powers have a little bit of a blind spot, maybe that's what that's in reference to, or that the fact is that she was so blind that she only saw a small part of the picture rather than seeing the whole picture. There's many different ways I feel like you can interpret that, because I think even she's not 100% sure what it all means. But it seems like, at least for now, Father Ignatius seems to be filling in for the Monsignor. He's the one that's going to be giving out the assignments to everyone, so. Now, this next job that they ended up getting involved Kristen getting, I don't think, maybe, do correct me if I'm wrong, maybe we've only seen Kristen's house from a certain angle. We've never seen the fact that she has a next door neighbor that is so right there. I never realized that. That's wild. I mean, they might as well be living in an apartment building, like how close those walls. I mean, maybe that's just New York in general. I've never lived in New York. I'm sure people are like, oh yeah, that's kind of New York houses. Either way, like, the fact is, like, I've lived in apartments where, like, sharing, obviously, where I've shared the wall with someone, so it kind of reminded me of that. It's like, oh, it's literally a hop and a skip between both doors. I mean, it's just kind of like, oh, step over this a little bit and you're like in your neighbor's yard. I thought that was wild. I was like, that's so interesting. I also had to look it up. The actress who plays Sheila, she looks so familiar and I just don't know what I recognize her from. It feels like it's something recent, but maybe it's not recent. Maybe it's just something, I don't know. That actress looks so familiar and I can't place where I recognize her from. But Kristen and her never had any real interactions till now. And it's like, oh, did you need something? Oh, actually, I'm with the assessors. Really? It's like, yeah, oh, did they pick you because you were neighbors? It's like, no, it just happened to be that case. It's like, oh, that is a weird coincidence. Like, yeah, coincidence, huh? And the fact that, because Father Ignatius just kind of like, yeah, here's one. He just randomly picked, he doesn't know Kristen that well. He doesn't know her address. He just randomly picked a job that came her way. I mean, the files could have been sitting there for a while, so eventually the Monsignor would have given it to them, but I don't think it was in that pile necessarily because the Monsignor knew it was going to be Kristen's. It's like, no, it's just like, these are like reports that came in because once again, they handle stuff all over New York. But I guess it makes sense. I mean, the grand scheme of things too, we know that plumbing issue, that demonic plumbing thing was never settled. And the moment they start talking about the noises and stuff, I'm like, oh, this has to be dealing with like Kristen and them's like demonic thing that they haven't quite, I mean, I guess they've dealt with it to the best that they can, but now it's bled over to this family. Because then they start, like, Sheila starts mentioning stuff like, yeah, there was blood in the sink. My son saw an eyeball or something come out of the toilet. It's like, oh. So Kristen's like, cool. So, like, I saw blood in the sink. I just assumed it's because it was an old house. It's like, well, she's like, I don't know what I thought. And Ben's like, yeah, I saw an eye come out of the toilet. And you didn't tell me? It's like, I didn't want to freak you out. Well, she's like, well, I am freaked out now. So this is all hitting all at once. So I was like, okay. So then Kristen's trying to get a better understanding of everything because she's trying to figure out whether or not like her girls are messing with the neighbors. Like, oh, are you guys making noise? And Lynn's like, no, that's not us. If anything, their daughter is messing with us. What? So yeah, she messes with Lynn. Lynn used to kind of be scared about it, but now not No, not Lynn. Lynn's saying that Laura used to be afraid about it, but it's like, yeah, she just thinks it's a joke now. And it's about Sheila's daughter, Crystal. And I was like, she doesn't have a daughter, does she? The moment we go over there, hi, your daughter, Crystal? I don't have a daughter. Ha 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 ha. Okay, so the plot continues ticking. So it's like, who has Laura been hearing this entire time? It's like, well, there's been as we find out later on in the episode, there's so much damn demonic. To be fair, there's been so much demonic related shit to that house for so long, you know? Like when the djinn was in, like, cause, we got a shot, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we got a shot of every evil and demon that Kristen has interacted with. It makes sense, like, George has been a thing, he went away, he came back. There was the thing that had a dismembered body. It's from the elevator episode from last season. God, is that the episode I'm thinking of? I think so. I think that's the same episode. The one where, like, Ben got stuck, like, down below. And there's the one about, like, the ghost that, like, the spirit that got cut in half. Like, we see all of them. It's like, see a lot of familiar faces of demons and just supernatural stuff that we've seen over the course of this series. So I think that's just kind of why. Just like, this house is so damn infected with the supernatural and just demons and shit. Shouldn't be too much of a surprise considering, like, yeah, some of work would follow you home, you know? In most cases, that's usually a literal sense, too. But even in this case, it makes sense that it will be a literal sense, too. It's like, yeah, people have a tendency to bring work home with them. So why would you be the case? Especially considering the demons and stuff have always been interested in you and your family, especially Alexis. What really caught me by surprise is when they're like, okay, they're going to contact Andy and stuff like that, try and get in contact with him. And Sheila comes over. Cheryl comes over and she's like, all right, and she's prepping like this speech to give, like, oh, I'm so sorry about your dad. He would have been. I'm like, you're killing Andy? It makes sense. Grace kind of scared the shit out of you last episode when she drew where Andy was being hidden. So I was like, oh boy. And so Cheryl's laying the groundwork. Edward gets up there like, oh, I'm sorry. Have I been calling him Robert before now? Maybe I have. Edward is like, yo, I'm sorry, Andy, Avalanche, we haven't given up, and Kristen's breaking down, but the kids are like, no, Grace said she was coming back, and she's like, maybe we could go to him. It's like, well, we haven't talked to him in a while. The moment they're talking about Leland. That's what surprised me too. Like, how the hell did you make that leap? Like, I know you're like, right, someone's got to be messing with us, so it's got to be Leland. It makes sense, but at the same time, it's like, why would they know? Like, they knew to set that up. They're like, all right, could Leland be messing with us? Well, we know he messes with us through technology, so. And Cheryl's kind of like, oh, well, what are you guys doing? Maybe we should go downstairs and get some pizza. And they're setting the whole thing up. I'm like, what are they doing? And she's messaging him and waiting for Leland to respond. And the moment they hear the bing on his side of things, it's also coming out of the room from the Zoom with Edward. So they're like, Leland's behind it. Mom, don't believe him. Hang up. It's bullshit. Dad's alive. This is Leland. He's messing with you. I was like, oh my God. I was like, they nailed you. Holy shit. I was like, how did they know? Like to know Leland was up to that, like, that's one thing. It was suspect. How'd you even get to, how did they, that jump in logic is so interesting to me. Like, how they even, I guess they've been trolling Leland the entire time, so it's no surprise they're like, he's going to come at us with some point, but like, to know that it was him, like, he had to be the one responsible. I guess it's like, right, suddenly saying our dad is dead and whatnot, and it's like, it's something over online, and it's like, well, how is Leland trying to mess with us? He's always trying to mess with us online, so I wonder, was it Lynn who really kind of pushed for that, or was it Alexis who kind of suggested it? Either way. Obviously, Kristen is worried out of her mind about the whole thing, and she even confides in David. She was even saying, can you pray for Andy for me? And she even prays and saying, like, oh, I'll go to Mass. Me and the girls will go to Mass, like, every week. I'm like, that's going to be an interesting problem. Because she ends up talking about it, too. She hasn't prayed since she was 14 years old. And I was curious, like, what was it that made you stop praying? And there was also that sweet moment between Ben and Laura, where Laura was like, oh, I can't sleep. And he's like, oh, you know what I do when I can't sleep? I stay awake. And she comes, sits out in the hall with him. And it's like, we know Leland was behind this. Like, we got to try and find our dad beforehand. And it's like, Ben's like, all right, we'll talk about it when you wake up in the morning. Obviously, they were going to kill Andy, get rid of him, but they're like, well, we can't do that now because now they know something's up. So they shift plans. So obviously David's the first one that shows up at the door. And the second, then I was like, oh, is it going to be Andy or something? Like, what's, and he shows up like nothing happened. I was like, and so my mind immediately was like, that's not Andy. It's someone pretending to be Andy. But then as the conversation goes on, he's like, yeah, I have a black spot in like my mind. I'm like, oh, okay. You're the real Andy. They just wiped your memories about everything. Because I thought being around Cheryl would trigger it, but it didn't. But seeing Grace's drawing did something to him. Like, it was like the memories are buried deep. They're there. They're just being clouded. And like the moment he tries to remember anything, it overwhelms him. So Cheryl's like, oh, you should go upstairs. And she made sure as hell to erase that. Plus, there was that moment Kristen was like, oh, you want to go upstairs? And she's overhearing a conversation between Andy and her mom. And it's like, wait, where's the vitriol between the both of you? And he's like, oh, I love you. And I'm like, despite everything that happened with Andy, I was like, Kristen's like, and she's trying to brush it off because it's like, right, you know, we all were worried. We thought Andy died, so it makes a lot of sense why, you know. But at the same time, it's like, no, I believe Cheryl overplayed her hand. I think she wanted to, like, because she knew, like, right, if Andy came back as just Andy, he would have just had enough of Cheryl shit. He already wanted to kick her out before he left. So if he was back to being himself, he would have just kept her at a distance. So now, by making him more like, oh, we were really tight, because I'm about to say, like, I guess she didn't want to, at first I was like, maybe she didn't want to deal with his bullshit anymore, but it's like, well, there's that, but also, if they're on good terms, he's going to keep her close and she won't have to, like, weasel her way over. She'll being good. So Kristen sees it as weird, but she's just kind of like, oh yeah, I'll chalk it up to, yeah, we were all worried about him, so that's why. But then she wakes up and finds him in the part of the house where they're constructing, and he's just like, I'm trapped. I guess there's some part of him subconsciously remembering what he can't remember it, but like that feeling and everything stayed with him, because he was like that for probably, it wasn't even weeks, it was definitely months he was like that. So being in that state like that would do something to you. Those like traumatic scars from that would kind of stay with him. And then they found this message written on the wall, and Sister Andrea comes over and reads it, and part of it included her name and talking about her getting caught in brimstone and her going around doing some demon exterminating. And I love how, like, yeah, and then Lynn just busts in out of nowhere. I'm thinking about becoming a nun, and even Andrea's almost like, what? Did you talk to your mom about it? I was like, yeah, your mom's not going to be too... Kristen was super not cool with it, but even more not cool than I thought she would be. Like, she literally flipped out on Lynn. She's like, you want to get a tattoo and an ear piercing? We can talk about that. But no, a nose ring and a tattoo, we can talk about that. But being in the church, no. I'm like, that's so weird. I was like, that seemed like a very, very extreme reaction to that. But either way, like, while Lynn's kicking with her, Andrea's proceeding to kill all these demons. And then at one point, she sees them all scurry out of the house, into the section of the house that was being constructed. Because they had previously done the exorcism over there, like, cleansing the place. But it's like, Andrea's like, yeah, this place is, yeah, like, you pushed them from over there back to over here, so you're going to have to exercise this place yet again. And she'd actually previously given David a net, because I love that whole demon Kristen messing with him, being like, oh, please, God, make something happen to Andy so that I could comfort myself with a priest who wants to, comfort me. And he's just like, shut up. And she's like, what? It's kind of what you want, right? And so she brought him a net, and then she looks at Demon Kristen, but she's like, because she even says, I don't know what it looks like to you, but it's a mosquito. So once again, she sees it for what it is, but anytime David sees it, it looks like Kristen. So I love even to the point that she learned some interesting news. Valerie wasn't pregnant with her baby, wasn't pregnant with her egg. So it's probably still connected to, what's that place called again? RFM or something like that? I'm always forgetting it. RSM? The fertility place that took her egg and just is connected to all this demon stuff. She found out, like, nope, someone else had it, and, like, there's a particular address associated with it. I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but the moment it's like, yeah, there's a certain address, I was like, tell me it's where your mom works. Tell me that's the building Cheryl works. I was chanting it over and over and over again. I was like, please. When we saw like the skyrise building, I'm like, that seems like that might be the building. And she's going up, and I thought she was going to see on the board or whatever that was going to say like, Cheryl's name or something. It said DF. I was like, oh, well, I guess in the grand scheme of things, with everything Cheryl has been doing at her new job, it makes sense, of course, that she's tied to DF and everything. That's the thing that people were trading last episode. Like, yeah, you have to pass the tip on to somebody, which we never found out what happened to the guy that Kristen passed it on to. Did he pass it on to someone else after kind of having a little bit of hell and haunting himself, being chased by that and haunted by that shadowy creature? Either way, the moment I was like, oh, maybe it's Oz. I was like, the moment at first we saw the receptionist area, I was like, oh man, it's not her mom's work. And then we saw her mom, I was like, yeah, that's her mom's work. I was like, yeah. Because I was like, when is it? Like, I was like, I kept pushing for it, being like, Kristen has to find out about Cheryl's connection and all this. She has to. Putting all that aside, Kristen rewinding a little bit, Kristen going to visit David because he was running and Demon Kristen's there like, oh, here, David, kind of handing him some water, and he goes into his room. He's like, leave me alone. And she's like, oh, sorry. And he touches her face. She's like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, shit. He's like, I thought you were someone else. She's like, who'd you think I was? Completely dodged that question. It's like, yeah, I can't admit what that was really about. But, he was kind of there for her because now she's having a conversation. So I kind of, it's like, right, I missed us talking. It's like, oh, I missed it too. It's like, so I kind of made a promise to God that me and the girls would go to mass like every week, but because she's a person that's like, right, I stopped praying when I was 14 because I prayed for my parents not to get divorced. They got a divorce. Not that I hate God or anything. I just stopped believing. And then the first time I pray in all that time, lo and behold, oh, Andy shows up literally the next day. She's like, I don't know if that's a coincidence or that means I'm supposed to just start believing in something I can't believe. And it's like, well, do you want me to teach you how to believe? Is that what this is about? Because you know that I believe? And she's like, no. And she's trying to dance around it like, do I really kind of owe God something for this? And David kind of tells that parable of the guy looking for a space. He's like, God, please give me that space. I'll do whatever you want. The space opens up. Never mind. I found a space. I was like, I like that story. I like that twist on it. I was wondering where that story was going to go in that regard. I was like, because obviously there's supposed to be a direct correlation to, Kristen. And, David's like, right, eventually, like, there's all this miraculous stuff happening around you. God's been showing you signs time and time again. Eventually, you're just going to have to finally acknowledge it. So, what Kristen does in that, well, with everything that goes down into the episode, it might imply, like, maybe she might open herself up to it. We'll have to wait and see. But then there's that whole situation of David putting up the net. And then, like, Demon Kristen almost looking kind of almost like sad, like, oh, okay, and then just disappears. So I'm like, cool, no more having to worry about that anymore. So that's going to be interesting. Like I said, plus this whole Lynn wanting to be which she had implied, she had actually told her mom she never had sex with her boyfriend, but the way she was talking to Andrea, I don't know whether she, like, because she was like, oh, like, afterwards he kind of didn't want to talk to me anymore. And Andrea was like, oh, after you had sex? And so, so you guys, I figured you were probably lying to your mom about that, and for her, it's just like, right, everyone around her is so obsessed about talking about boys, but it's like, she's just trying to find that purpose in life. And she's not saying, like, she wants to become a nun fully, but she is curious about it. And I'm like, that is interesting. Because I guess if that was the case, maybe we could see Lynn hanging around the church a little bit more, her interacting with David and Andrea more, potentially. I don't know. I don't know what to expect from that. That's such an interesting element for her out of it. I mean, especially with everything going on with one of your sisters kind of trying to be pulled to the dark side. You becoming a potential nun is wild. Everything that's happened around your mom and her work, and your dad's going through some shit right now too, so it's fascinating. So we kind of get the back-to-back whammies. David is getting a vision again. Interesting enough, it's still the whole like, oh, like the saint or whoever, the angel, the person he's seeing is black. I don't think that's kind of speaking volumes, but the person said like 38 days Babylon or something like that. So I was like, is that supposed to be like 38 days until the end of the world? Maybe. or maybe like the demons, the evil winning this war in 38 days or something. Like or maybe the ultimate showdown is going to be in 38 days. Either way, I thought that was fascinating, especially because I didn't even think about it the entire episode until we got to the end. I was like, oh shit, we never did get the book thing, did we? And it's like, yeah, what was it? The Demon of the End. I was like, ooh. But then we got the flip side of that. What was it? Like the Angel of Beginnings, which we'll talk about that like once I finish wrapping up everything else. But Kristen going to her mom's, it's like, Mom, why are you here? It's like, oh yeah, because I work here. And it's like, wait, DF, wait, this is where my egg was sent. What's going on? What's going on? And then a pregnant lady walks up. I'm like, oh, she's like, oh, my husband's not here yet or whatever. And the person is Leland. I was like, fuck you. And now it's like, the moment he's like, yeah, I thought he was going to look at Kristen and say, thank you, or something like that. Like talking to everyone saying, oh, thank you. But I thought he was going to look at specifically Kristen, but he's saying the line of, we're going to be parents, because that's where her egg went, and he impregnated it. It's like, Jesus. And you can see like just the bottom of her face, but Cheryl does turn, like when Leland shows up, she does turn to look to Kristen. She's kind of a little like, oh, kind of bad timing. And now it's like, oh, cool. So your mom is neck deep in all this. She knows how you feel about Leland. She's working with Leland. You're probably going to find out some of the debaucherous shit your mom's been up to at DF. Now you know it's tied to so much stuff. It's like, oh, it's like you're going to have a whole bunch of questions, which is definitely going to be interesting. And then there's the Andy situation, which he's walking into the room and there's all the demons and stuff gathered around. They part ways so he can come over and see like the demonic baby, which is the same one Kristen saw like, 2 or 3 episodes ago when she was thinking about the egg and she had that dream about it. And then Kurt walks up. He's like, it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? It's like, right. Kurt did like straight up sell his soul. I was like, oh, interesting. So I guess Kurt's more like Cheryl at this point in time. Andy's borderlining on that department, or just, I don't think he sold his soul or whatever, but like, I guess that was supposed to be like pseudo, not unless they used maybe it's not even Leland's semen, maybe it's Andy's, so that is their child, like, but it's being grown in someone else, maybe, because Andy was there for a while, so they probably could have like taken his semen if they needed. I don't know. She seems further along than if that was the case, you know, so it probably legitimately was Leland's, but it's like knowing that he's the one that's having your baby. Once again, I guess the Valerie thing is just kind of like, yeah, that's just another casualty and byproduct of that fertility facility. So once again, a wild season finale. Hell of a way to end it off. And like I said, I like the element of, so I'm wondering going forward, are we going to get what I kind of thought? Because what was it? Episode 5 was the Angel episode. Like the book was like, oh, the contemporary pop-up book of like angels or something, and I was like, oh, it's the back half of the season going to be that. It's like, no, the back half of the season continued to be demons, but since we flipped over and was like, oh, the angel of beginning, I'm like, so is the next part of the season going to be kind of about angels? Because once again, we kind of tiptoed in that direction, not even back in season 1, back in this last season 2 with the whole Archangel Michael and everything. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where everything takes us going forward. The show was renewed for a 4th season. I believe it was a couple months ago when it got, or maybe not a couple months, maybe a couple weeks ago when it got renewed. Either way, I was so excited when I heard that news because I'm like, oh, I need more of this show in my life. Dude, I cannot wait to see where the hell season 4 takes us with all of this. Oh, baby. Andy's back in the picture. Memory's a little hazy, but he's in the mix of all of this now. Kristen knows that her mom's connected some of this somehow. So how those pieces to the puzzle work with the whole Lynn situation, Andrea, I'm so excited to see where the next season takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.